I don't know what it's gonna sound like, but here we go. Ego. Hmm. There's a message inside. There's a voice that lay in a song. There's a reason I try to ignore its word and withdraw. Take time to pause, reason the cause, listen for what I should do. Space I don't know, chances to grow, found when I look beyond view.
Melting Pot, a global podcast series hosted by Payal, connects guests who have inspiring stories and reaches out to a multicultural audience over 52 countries. Guests are diverse, such as celebrities, entrepreneurs, travelers, and many more who've had a turning point in their lives and moved over to a holistic lifestyle. Follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, social media. Hi everyone. Today I am in conversation with the supremely talented Sarah Elizabeth Charles. Sarah is a musician. She is known as a jazz vocalist and a composer, and she's released 4 very, very critically acclaimed albums with her band Scope, and this is between 2012 and today. And she's also an educator. And I have to add here, before I start talking to you, Sarah, that I had the absolute privilege of being a part of a concert, your concert rather, at the iconic Smithsonian African American Museum. And I have to be and I'm being extremely honest, I was so mesmerized by your beautiful voice. And I think your stage performance was incredible. And what was interesting was that it was so intimate, the whole setting, that you felt so close to the audience. And I love the way you communicate and you talk, and your whole body language, other than your voice, is absolutely incredible. So I'm really, really excited that we're going to have this conversation today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Payal.
Okay, so I know you've been asked this question probably like a million times, and I'm going to add to that. What inspired you to a career in music?
Mm. When you ask that question, or when anyone asks that question, I always have a slightly different answer depending on what I'm, moving through or where I'm at any given time. What comes up this morning for me is that, my family and their support inspired me to have a career in music. Music was always something that that resonated with me, that I felt drawn and pulled toward from a really young age. I would, sing often. There was a lot of singing in my family's house, especially with my grandmother on my mother's side, my maternal grandmother. And she also had a piano at her house. My grandfather played the accordion. So holidays and weekends and evenings were always filled with a lot of music. And my father is originally from Port-au-Prince, Haiti. And, we'd also listen to a lot of compa and rara and different styles, like all of the new music coming out of Haiti, my uncle would sort of send our way. And so we would always be listening to that music too, and dancing, and then listening to the radio and whatever was current. So I remember being surrounded by music from a really young age and wanting to take piano lessons, wanting to sing in the choir at church, wanting to take voice lessons as I got a little bit older. But it wasn't until I was a teenager and looking at what to do essentially next after high school, after my high school time, that I really felt encouraged, or like a career in music would be possible. I applied early decision to Fordham University with the intention to study pre-law and go to law school. And when I decided to do that, I did it. I went through the whole process. My parents sat me down after I sent my application in and said, you can always be a lawyer. You can always go back to law school. But why don't you try music first?
Wow, which is very rare, because normally parents
Yeah,
would have a very different point of view and say that, are you sure? Will you be able to be successful? If you're creative and in music, you need to have something that holds you and something that is secure, so
yeah.
I'm really impressed that your parents actually said that to you and suggested they clearly saw the talent in you. So why jazz? Because that is clearly your musical style, and that's the genre of music that you excel in, and that's your career. So why jazz, and how did that come about?
Yeah, that word is so complicated, or can be so complicated, and the music and the tradition and the lineage is so beautiful. Jazz and Black American music is something that is a huge part of my foundation as a creative person. And I also grew up listening to all sorts of other styles of music and being influenced and impacted by all sorts of styles of music. And so, if you asked someone, is Sarah Elizabeth Charles a jazz vocalist? I think that you would get different answers depending on who you ask. I know the repertoire. I know hundreds of standards and have studied the music, and the music that I write, the music that I'm a part of, the other bands that I'm a part of, in addition to my own. The styles are can like be very broad and wide ranging while being embedded in the foundation of jazz and improvisation. My music, they recently, the Grammys came out with another category, or multiple other categories, one of which is called alternative jazz.
What is your creative process? Because you write original music as well, right? Original
I
scores.
do.
So
Hmm.
what is your process?
My process, it's very contingent upon inspiration and waves. I would say waves of inspiration. So I'm not a songwriter or a composer who writes every day. I really wish I could say that I was. I still wish that I could say that I was, even though at some point in my life I'll probably just have to accept what feels the most natural, or maybe I will become that, or develop a different kind of practice. But I I feel each of the I'm adopting this new terminology that I heard from the director of Joe's Pub in New York City. We're working on
Actually,
a couple.
you did share the YouTube
Oh
link
yeah.
with me, and I did listen to it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, so the director there, Alex Knowlton, is becoming a good friend and a close collaborator, and I'm going to be doing more with the pub in the upcoming year. And he described one of my most recent projects that hasn't been released yet, but I've performed a couple of times. Not the project that you saw, but something
Okay.
else.
Yeah.
It's a project, a song cycle that I set to Maya Angelou's poetry, and he described it as exactly that, a song cycle. And I realized, I was like, wow, that's how I write. That term, song cycle, really embodies my creative process, because it really is kind of this cycle of like, oh, okay, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes, and then I get to it, and I'm
Yeah.
playing, and I'm like doing it, and it's maybe weeks or a couple of months of just like churning, 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 and maybe it take a little bit of time, and then I go back and I rewrite, and maybe something else new comes out, and there's like a period of time. There's been a period of time for each of my song cycles, each of my records, essentially, what have been my records thus far, that I'm just writing, and that's 6 months to a year, and I'm writing and I'm rewriting, and we're performing the material and learning more about it. That's a big part of my creative process too, is writing things and then getting them to a point where it's like, okay, we can perform this. It's not done, but we can perform it to learn more about it so that the music can tell us more about it. And so we'll rehearse, perform, see what worked, see what didn't. They'll go back to the drawing board, so it's a lot of like these waves of creative energy, of inspiration, coupled with exploration with other folks, my band, other collaborators, and really letting the big component at this point that I will share with my students often too is really letting the music tell me what it needs. that's something, I have the original, my original band is John Davis, who you saw on drums.
Yeah.
Jesse Elder, who was the former keyboardist and the keyboardist for a very long time and pianist in my band. For this most recent record, I've used Jesse Fisher, but Jesse Elder is uh, the original pianist. He's a phenomenal composer himself and musician in person. Bernice Earl Travis was the bassist, and Jordan Peters in recent years, who was on guitar at the Smithsonian, is the guitarist. And all of these people helped me to cultivate this environment of exploration.
Are there any social issues that you're so passionate about that they then influence your music?
Absolutely. I think that being a multiracial woman, having grown up, where I did and how I did, we were the only Haitian French Canadian family anywhere from what I could see in my hometown of Springfield, Massachusetts. It was very, very Irish, Catholic, Puerto Rican area when I was growing up. And so there was always kind of, I don't know, this hyper awareness that I had of culturally feeling different than others, therefore also trying to assimilate. There was also an African American population where I grew up, and everybody, these communities were very segregated. They lived very separately from each other. And it wasn't until I was in junior high, around, age 12, 13, that I met a few friends who were also products of multiracial relationships. And up until that point, just kind of feeling like, ooh, where do I fit? Where do I belong? And there's this term now in our society called code switching. I was a master code switcher when I was younger, when I was growing up. I had so many, and I don't see that as actually a negative a negative term, because for me as a kid, it felt like it was like surviving. It was like, how do I survive? How do I make friends? Okay, well, I guess this part of me will come out. It all felt like parts of myself, but there were so many different parts because I was from this multicultural, multi-ethnic background. And so it's like, okay, with this group, I'll let this out, but I won't let this out. With that group, and I have so much compassion for that little girl, because for me, my that former version of myself, because I just wanted to fit in. I just wanted to be liked. I just wanted to do well. I just wanted, and now as an adult, I feel like there are that sort of hyper awareness, that sort of like internal vigilance, feeling like I needed to be a certain way in order to be accepted. Like all of that has made me more sensitive, I think, and more observant of different things in the world. And my musical space, my creative space, has given me an outlet through which to like channel those observations, those feelings, those reflections, and share them. And so I think in my early days of songwriting, I often would, speak to issues that I was observing outside of myself, or that I was finding that were happening in the world, that I was coming across through my work as a young teaching artist at the time, which my teaching artistry and that career started through Carnegie Hall and through their Wild Music Institute, their outreach division. I was teaching privately prior to that point, but I didn't start teaching in carceral settings, in prisons, for instance, or through their Lullaby project, or working with young people in New York City until about 12 years ago. And so that the start of that career, coupled with the start of my band and my original music, really starting to share that with the world, really impacted what I was writing and what I was sharing. And I was kind of just trying to like honestly reflect my own perception, with definitely some tone and some message and opinion, right?
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible, to not reflect your opinion or your bias ever. To be completely objective is like to not be human, I think.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
faith,
So
this
you're
idea of,
evolving as a person, and your music is also evolving along with you. I think that's really what it is. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's the only way I plan to do this for the rest of my life. And so I hope to, I do plan to, my human brain is like, yes, that is the plan. I hope to. And in some way or another, I don't know what that will look like at different points, but in order to do that, I feel like that what you just said has to be the case. It has to, as I continue to evolve and grow, so does my music, and so does the sound of it. And so, if I'm the artist who people are like, oh, can't quite put our finger on Sarah, can't quite put her in a box, can't quite, then if that's what that means, then okay, I'm okay with that. And I also am, I'm willing to ask for the willingness to accept that that will mean inevitably that I won't be everybody's cup of tea, or some people, that oversharing for some people, sharing on stage, for instance, about my miscarriage, or how often do women have the space to do that? And so instead of waiting for somebody to give it to me, I'm trying to just take that and share honestly, because it feels good to me when someone says, how are you, to be able to say, actually, I'm not great, I'm moving through a miscarriage at this moment. When, I don't know how that's going to make that other person feel, but you asked me how I am, and that's my honest, answer. And that's a loss like any other loss. And that's a loss that's about, the creation of life in this world. It's about, and has to do with the reason and the mechanism via which we're all here. That's a really important thing to leave space for. And if you feel comfortable to take space to share about, I think. So anyway, I'll stop.
No, and that's what makes you different as compared to, a lot of the other musicians or other people. I mean, as a person, yes, music, but other than that as well, makes you different because you are so open about sharing, and it's a healing process as well for you. And I think, no, absolutely, I believe that you have to be you and be honest to yourself and not try and pretend to be someone else just because,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, no, and no, absolutely. And I can see that you're going to go really far with this. You already are doing so well, and this kind of thinking is, and this kind of openness is only going to make you get more and more evolved as a person, and as a human being, and that will reflect in your music always. I'm pretty certain of that. So before I let you go, Sarah, because I mean, this is like we're chatting and I could continue.
I'm just hanging out. Yeah.
But I wonder if you would, I did mention in my email, and, would you like to just a minute or so just sing for anything that comes to mind, or anything that you feel like you'd like to share with the audience? Would be great.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about that part of your email. Okay, so what comes up? I'm just not even going to question it. What comes up is this song on Blank Canvas. It's actually the last song on the record. It's called "The Message." And you may or may not hear, it's funny, my child, he's running around making noises above me.
Can't hear him at all.
I love it. Well, I can, so I'm going to channel his energy into this moment. But it's a song called "The Message," and you might construe the lyrics about that the lyrics are about, or you might misconstrue that the lyrics are about. I guess there's the chorus is, "I will find my way home. I will find my way home. I will find my way home back to you." And so the entire song is not about like a love or finding, my way home back to you, someone else. It's like my way home back to you, back to your true self, your peaceful essence, your whatever you might want to call it, or however you might think about it. Because sometimes I can get lost a little bit. So this song is all about tuning into that internal part of myself that I already have in me, that loves me, that thinks I'm enough, and that's guiding me if I let it. So yeah, it's early here, so I don't know what it's gonna sound like, but here we go. Ego. There's a message inside. There's a voice that lay in a song. There's a reason I try to ignore its word and withdraw. Take time to pause, reason the cause, listen for what I should do. Space I don't know, chances to grow, found when I look beyond view. Walking through the world blind, gliding through the day half alone, finding so much more room in this present space of my own. Take time to pause, reason the cause, listen for what I should do. Space I don't know, chances to grow, found when I look beyond view. I will find my way home. I will find my way home. I will find my way home back to you. I will find my way home. I will find my way home. I will find my way home back to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure the people who will eventually be listening into this conversation will love it as well. It's been a privilege and a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we continue to stay connected, and your music truly is inspiring.
Thank you so much, Payal, for having me and for leaving space and for sharing yourself as well. I really appreciate you.
For more weekly conversations, do listen to Melting Pot on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Follow us on YouTube and on Instagram at Podcast Melting Pot. So until the next episode, this is Payal signing off.